Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks everybody for inviting us and sharing the discussions. I'm going to talk a little bit about neurotechnology, rehabilitation, and exoskeletons. So this is a new thing today, but the rest we've heard so far, which is great because I can go quicker through this. Here you can see pretty much a schematic similar to what Jose showed before in the case of a neurocontrol of an exoskeleton, and that's what I'm going to talk about, neurocontrolled exoskeletons to indirectly activate certain mechanisms. First of all, I want to start with this is nothing new, especially in science fiction movies. We all know different movies, TV shows, etc., that show neurotechnology in some sense, sometimes an avatar, sometimes neuro-controlled dreaming, or just sending thoughts to another person. Right, this is science fiction. So now the point is, this is the Trends Forum. Is this true? Is not true? We all know, but where are we going? Right, so, well, Jose showed partly all of this. We started with monkeys. It was 2002, 2003, where they showed this control of a joystick. And the monkey, and I think this is important for everybody here to understand, that the monkey was controlling a cursor on a screen, moving a joystick. But then Jose basically had this decoder of the brain activity and made the monkey move the cursor with the brain activity, shifting slowly the weights of the decoder, not on the joystick movement, but on the brain signals. So the monkey learned how to control that. And at some point, and this is the minimum energy law, the monkey did not move because he understood that by modulating the brain activity, he could control the joystick, right? This is neurotechnology. Be careful, because if you can control something with your brain, then there are other parts of the body that are not necessary, and this is consuming energy that you might need for something else. So this is important, and this is one of the first cases in which a human used this technology, in this case implantable, to control a cursor on a screen. So these are newer videos. I think we've seen a couple of them. This is probably the most recent one in terms of control of external robotic arms. In the lower case, this is a patient, a paraplegic patient, that has 3 implants, or 4, sorry, 3 or 4. I think these are the pedestals coming out of the skull, but the implants are below, and I think he has 4. He's controlling 2 arms, so it's bilateral arm moving, so you can think about the complexity of the control by using only a few cells in the brain. Because in one of these implants has from 54 to 96 channels, and you can record from probably 40 to 60 cells from each of them, so you can understand that this is not much compared to the brain. But even if you can use such a low number of cells, you can control things like 2 arms. I said exoskeletons. Well, this is pretty much a summary of lower limb and upper limb exoskeletons. There are a bunch of them. It's nothing new. This is something that's been there for a long time. But this is robots, right? So we saw brain control of external robots. What if we control the body of the person that is controlling it and not something external to it? So why don't we change from visual feedback to visual and some proprioceptive feedback in the case they have some afferent or sensitive remaining there, for example, in the case of a stroke? Okay, so if we use that, we end up knowing that neurotechnology, in this case, these neural interfaces, are a fantastic neuroscientific tool to understand a little bit more about science. So what happens if you control something and you learn how to control it? So Jose showed a bit about that too, and how can we modify the behavior? And how can we learn this new neuroprosthetic skill? Is that learning? Is that motor learning? Yes, no? So there are questions that could be used and can be also leveraged to, for example, try to induce rehabilitation by exploding some mechanisms like the Hebbian learning, like cells that fire together, wire together. If somebody's learning that, can we induce some changes, some neuroplasticity? Well, this is the classical instrumental learning, where basically you're trying to move your arm, and this is the game that the kids have, that, okay, try to put the star in the star, and then you have some commands going from the motor cortex to the muscles, and then you move the arm, you feel it, you see it, and by doing that, and the repetition makes you learn and create some reflexes. So then is where you activate these Hebbian learning mechanisms that says that cells that fire together well, wired together. But what happens when you have a lesion there? Well, those signals don't go down through the same road because there is a lesion there, so they cannot pass. Or some of them can pass, but not all of them. So what if we can bypass that lesion that is not allowing our signals to go down with something like a neural interface in which we can get this activity, interpret it from the brain, maybe some residual activity in the muscles, if there is some, and then I can understand how this person wants to move, and then I move it with an exoskeleton. Then maybe I can create this neuroplasticity mechanism and make the cells that fire together because I am trying to move, and now I'm moving again because this exoskeleton is moving me. I'm seeing that I'm moving, and I'm actually feeling it. So basically, we're closing the loop between intention of movement and the movement itself. So this is something that we did a long time ago. We did a clinical trial, controlled design, in which one group of patients controlled with the brain activity the movement of an exoskeleton, a robotic device. And the other group, the control group, they thought they were controlling the robotic device, but we faked it. So we moved it randomly, matching more or less the amount of movement that they had, both groups. And then we saw that only the group that controlled with the brain the exoskeleton, the robot, improved significantly in the clinical scale. We're talking about patients that were like 4 years after a stroke, so were hand completely paralyzed. So normally before they were saying, like the doctors, neurologists were saying, like, well, there's nothing we can do with this patient. So we showed that by doing this or using this kind of technology, they can recover certain movement. We're not talking about playing the piano. We're talking about moving some millimeters, maybe 1 centimeter. But it's maybe the beginning of something. And since then, a few other groups basically reproduced our results, and that shows that, well, there is promise here, so why don't we go a little bit further? And we saw that there's also, in stroke patients, in many of them, there's residual muscle activity. Maybe they are paralyzed, maybe they cannot move the hand, but that doesn't mean that there is no EMG activity, muscle activity. Maybe it's very low activity that is not enough to produce a movement because there is also spasticity, which is a hyperflexion, the classical position of a stroke spasticity patient, or there is not enough force to induce the movement, but there is something there that can be used. And if we use the activity on the healthy arm, because they normally are hemiplegic, and train a decoder or a translator and flip it to the other side, we can use that to retrain the paretic side and make it learn again without learning maladaptive movements, which is a classical problem of patients, that they try to learn again, but because there's some parts missing of the nervous system, they maladapt and they produce wrong synergies. So this is the platform that we're using, and this is a non-invasive system. It's controlling this exoskeleton, which is allowing several degrees of freedom, functional movements, grasping, etc. On the top, you can see the electrical activity of the brain, and on the bottom, the electrical activity on the muscles. So what we did is basically they need to be activity in their brain, and then we check what's happening at the muscle level, and if they coincide, then we move the exoskeleton. So we're making this brain movement contingency all the time active, so we try to evoke these Hebbian mechanisms and plasticity. And it is nice to see that this is possible, which is actually great. This is scenario, immersive. There's a video game that helps us maintain the motivation of the patient, but it's very tedious to put this thing on because there's so many channels. Then the exoskeletons, we talked about non-invasive means because they're easier to wear, but they're wearable. So Guillermo talked about, yeah, the wearable, it is there, but you have to go and use it. While if you have it implanted, you can use it all the time without the need of the setup, or at least a longer setup. So can we do something for that? Well, yes, but we need a multidisciplinary team for doing that. And in this case, it's a huge project in which we implanted a patient to do exactly the same thing, the same control with the exoskeleton, and we did that for 3 years. Right? So then we can actually see what's happening. Is it learning? Is it improving or not? And we implanted one of these Utah arrays in a patient, and we spent 3 years trying to do this transition between the brain to the muscle control. And slowly modifying this decoding from only using brain activity to introducing the muscle activity. Similar to what was done before in the primates with joystick and then slowly brain activity. In this case, it's brain towards muscle activity. This is the patient doing some cursor control. This is actually done, this project together with Jose, and this is actually his closed-loop decoding adaptation working. And in 3 minutes, this patient learned to do this cursor task. No practice before. You plugged it in, and in 3 minutes, she managed to do this, which is pretty remarkable. This is how it looks when she's controlling the exoskeleton. So she's seeing a render, a 3D render on the screen, and she's moving towards that goal and placing the position of that part, specific part that is in the color on the screen there to get the reward. But she learns how to control the 7th degree of freedom with the brain and the muscle activity slowly on time. And after 4 months of therapy, this is something, the only thing I can show you now, is hand was at 0, the arm was almost 0 too, and now she can, with the paretic hand, move the arm, do several tasks that are bilateral arm and so on, and actually she was super happy. So the first thing she recovered was lifting her arm so that she could put deodorant there, or when the shower, being able to wash her armpit again without the need of help or a bar on a wall. So that was very remarkable for her too. But also things that are complicating as washing or just sewing a button or opening the microwave door, things that for us are absolutely normal. For a patient like that has been, in this case, more than 3 years completely paralyzed, is very remarkable. I don't know if we've seen the cup going. Did we see in the video the cup go into the mouth and then I'm finished? This one? Yeah, so that's it. Well, thank you very much. This is an effort of a huge team, and I can just finish without thanking everybody there.